Hi, everybody. It's your Uncle Joe. That already sounds weird, doesn't it? Uncle Joe. Doesn't Uncle Joe sound like the afternoon host of some kids' cartoon show or something? It's like, hello, kids. It's your Uncle Joe. Gonna sit down again, watch some more fun cartoons. I don't know why I said that. It's raining. We get weird in Los Angeles when it rains. Everybody gets weird. The dogs get weird. The cats get weird. The traffic gets weird. Everything's weird. So I'm a little off today. Friday, March 12th, 2021, coming near the end of this pandemic, which is great and also a little strange. I forgot how to behave. Can you tell? When things reopen, I'm going to have to. How often did I turn down party invitations? I don't remember now. How often did I go to restaurants? What did I do? I mean, yeah, of course I'll figure it out, but this is so strange. Anyway, thanks to Hanu Dixit for that music. It's called Motel Rock. Royalty free, does not require credits, but I'm giving the credit anyway because I think it's kind of cool. Also reusing Nikki Hayworth's opening animation and Juan Camacho's drawing of my head. Today's guest, another cool cat. This guy, Steve Epstein, oh man, what a life he's led, huh? You'll see in the intro, he talks all about how he bounced around from this to that, and then he ended up at, where else? The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a place that he didn't even know existed, and that's where he ended up. So if you saw Mars Perseverance rover land on Mars last month, and then you saw the footage of the people in the control room narrating it as they go, pushing the buttons, doing the thing, and then high-fiving each other when they got word that it landed. Steve Epstein's responsible for all that video. The guy is the manager of the JPL MediaLab, and he's going to talk all about that. There's a really cool sequence towards the end where we show those 4 minutes of the thing approaching and back and forth, camera to this guy, camera to that room, so on and so forth. And he's talking about what's going on. It's pretty cool. So the editing, not much editing, thankfully. Lucky you, huh? Not much editing involved in this one. And enough about me, huh? Let's get on with this. Where did we first meet? Do you remember exactly?
I think we probably met on sort of, wasn't the official, but it was our softball field outside of Cal State Northridge.
It must have been. You're right, because we never did a show together.
I was never enrolled at CSUN. I never went there.
I didn't know that.
No, it was so around that time. So we're talking like 90 to 93 or 90, 91 era. I was between schools, and I'd been Doug Liebland and I were living together and roommates out in Santa Clarita when he was out there going to school and I was going to Cal Arts, and then I left Cal Arts, and then I was just hanging out, and he moved to CSUN, and so I grew up in that neighborhood, so I would rollerblade every day over to CSUN because I had nothing else to do and hang out in the green room and met all the theater folks and with Doug and everything. I think I ended up being in like more shows than some of the people enrolled in the program by the end of it.
This is news.
I was never enrolled in school.
Yeah, I never knew that you weren't enrolled there because you were in a number of productions. I thought, oh, he's another theater guy. And so you did the theater thing, and then didn't you move to Seattle for a while?
Yeah, I moved to Seattle after that. So
did you have something lined up, or did you just say Seattle looks cool?
No, it was. I mean, so I'd reached that point in after high school. I did some community college, and then I did Cal Arts, did music school, and then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Nothing was holding my interest much, and I was just kind of sick and tired of the San Fernando Valley, born and raised, and said, I got to get out of here. I'm going to go to the mountain and figure out who I am, and started looking around for like some real school to finish. And ended up at Seattle University.
Where you did finish?
Yeah.
Good for you. All right. I was worried for a second there.
Well, technically, I didn't because that's just the way I do it. But I left Seattle University 3 credits shy of my degree, thinking, I could just make up these 3 credits anytime in the future. But timing-wise, I needed to get out to New York, where Maureen was. And at the time, Adam Shoulder and I thought we were taking this rock opera to New York, going to be superstars. Uh, so here we are, I don't know, at 30 something years later. I never made up those 3 credits. So I never actually got my degree, but I was never pursuing anything career wise where a degree would have really made a difference.
I think
So
you're ahead
now
of the
just
curve.
my kids give me a hard time about it.
Well, this generation, I'm not sure the younger generation is going to go to college as often as our generation did because it's so prohibitively expensive. And you're living proof that you don't need a degree.
I have 2 kids, 16 and 12, who could teach college level courses from the things they've learned on YouTube. I mean, they absorb, genres of content. My older son won 2 GOBs in middle school and went to the state finals for geography, GOB, National Geographic's GOB, purely from stuff he learned on his own through watching YouTube videos and just being interested in the topic. So
Wow.
yeah, there's lots of ways to learn these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish, don't you wish the internet had been there when we were in college? It would have made life a lot easier.
Totally.
Oh, God.
Totally. But that brings us to what I do for a living, because
Right. Which
I couldn't have done it without the internet.
We're getting to that. So then you leave Seattle, and did you go straight into video production?
No. I left Seattle thinking I was going to be writing rock operas.
Right,
and
the rock
music.
opera.
Got to New York City, got married, and just started treading water like you do in New York when you have no job or prospects, and spent a couple of years there just keeping my head above water, and realized, in LA, I know a lot of actors and musicians, and apartments are bigger for the same money, and I could set up a little project studio and I could start recording things on my own. And why don't we just go back there? And we did. And that's how I got back to LA. When I got back to LA in 98, so prior to leaving, actually, even to going to Seattle, my uncle was the bureau chief of CNBC in Los Angeles and worked out of the Catalina building, which is no longer there, across the street from the main NBC campus in Burbank. And I was working there from 21 years old, prior to going to Seattle, doing studio stuff for him as a freelancer. I ran camera on Tom Snyder's show for a year and a half before I moved away when he came back to TV. And so when I moved back to LA in 98, I knew I had that kind of lined up as a freelance gig. So I could get, a few hours a week here and there in the studio. I ended up working on a ton of shows, the CNBC lineup and MSNBC lineups at that time. We had Geraldo was still over there, Chris Matthews, Keith Olbermann, all those folks who would come in and do shows, and a bunch of other stuff. And I did camera, I did audio, I did prompter, I did floor directing. I kind of learned all that studio stuff. And at the same time, there were some guys who were also freelancing there who were like, hey, you know where JPL is up in Pasadena? And I'm like, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, yeah, they have kind of the same thing as TV production studio, and they're always looking for freelancers to help out, and sign up there too, and you get more freelance work. And I thought, great, because freelance is great, leaves me time to play music and hang out with my friends and all that. So I signed up for JPL as a contractor in 98, actually, and started doing little bits and bobs here and there, come in for 4 hours and run camera on something, things like that. And then that led to broader work doing like AV support for them, where I would literally just sit in a room with a bunch of people and kind of run their slides, during presentations, set up the computer and the screen and all that kind of stuff. It's like being back in elementary school when I used to run the film strip projector.
Were you that kid? Were you that kid in elementary school?
Absolutely. Yeah, my AV career started in the 3rd grade when I begged to be the kid who could just roll the television out to the front of the classroom and turn it on to watch the Electric Company.
That's yes, LAUSD. It must have been. Yeah, that's what we did. Were your TVs the giant horsey things with the mustard yellow case on top of the thing? Yeah, they had those all over LAUSD. Yeah,
giant ass television on a metal cart. And that was my dream, to be the kid who could push it to the front of the room, turn it on. We'd all watch the Electric Company.
I think it's fantastic when children have their dreams realized.
Yeah, that's where it started.
I'm so glad. Keep going. So you're at JPL, and now, first of all, when you get hired there, is there a security clearance of some kind?
Yeah, so back then, as a contractor, you're going through a contract company, not directly hired through JPL. So JPL has a contract with it's almost like a temp agency, basically. So you sign up with them, and I remember filling out a mountain of paperwork. I don't remember what it was really or anything. I was just signed everything they told me to sign, and that was that. I didn't really have any security clearance or anything at that point. I don't really have a lot of security clearance now either, but yeah. And so it was just another freelance gig. I was doing the CNBC, MSNBC stuff, and the JPL stuff, and a couple other things that I had floating around. And at the same time, I did come back to LA and get an apartment with a little second bedroom that I turned into a project studio, thinking I'd record a bunch of music there. And almost immediately started getting non-musical clients, doing voiceover, a lot of on hold, telephone on hold stuff. And then that evolved into, this was right as sort of the first wave of internet boom was happening, 99, 2000, and Flash animation was all the new rage, and everyone was producing original animated series in Flash. The internet.
I'm glad Flash is gone.
Oh yeah, totally. But at the time it was great because I was getting a lot of work, doing sound design and Foley stuff and VO work, and dialogue editing for animation, which taught me a ton. And then around 2000, 2001 maybe, desktop computing power finally caught up to the point where you could edit video on your home computer, legitimately. So I added that to my what I could do list and started getting clients doing video projects and things like that. And that's when Adam and I kind of got together and formed our little company. And he was doing graphic design and all that kind of stuff, and I was doing video stuff. And meanwhile, still had the JPL and the NBC and all my other freelance gigs, and was just spinning plates every day. And then in 2008, the economy blew up one day, and my little fledgling outside business just kind of went boom in a second, just completely evaporated. Everything got canceled. Nobody wanted to do anything. And then, of course, Adam Gordon got sick around then. And so I was, at that point, I now had a kid and a townhouse with a mortgage, and all these other things. And at that point, I'd been around JPL long enough to kind of sort of understand what was going on there. And wow, why didn't I ever know about this growing up in their backyard? And just was enthralled and wanted to do more. And then combined with where I was at work-wise in 2008, sort of looked at them as kind of a lifeboat. And at the time, another very close friend, kind of my other uncle, he's my uncle's best friend. My uncle's only 13 years older than me. So growing up, he was very much kind of older brother, these two guys. Anyway, he was also working at JPL and had gotten into the position where he was sort of responsible for crewing assignments. And I just told him, call me for anything and everything, and I'll say yes. And again, I kind of went through this period of I need to learn how to do every job in this environment, and learned a bunch more stuff. And then I had been doing this video editing on the outside, and he was able to show a reel of mine to a manager at JPL when there came up in a meeting one day. They were looking for somebody to pick up an assignment because the regular editors were too busy, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, check out Ep, he can do it. And then she gave me a shot. That went well. And then there was nothing for a while. And then I got another shot to do a project. And then that went well. And then in the summer of 2009, when I finally got hired as a full-time contractor at JPL, which means I could go in every day, 8 hours a day, like a normal person, still a contractor, and started doing a lot more project, production stuff, doing projects, short videos, web videos. Mostly, at first I started as the internal video guy. So anything that was sort of for internal training or internal messaging and things like that would come to me. And then over time, I started getting projects for the outside. And
when you say projects for the outside, what do you mean exactly?
Like the stuff that you see on our YouTube channel, our web videos. And this was all, again, this is also timing wise. So now we're, 2009, YouTube is really starting to come on as a marketplace for legit content, original stuff produced for that platform, basically. And it became evident, prior JPL would do video pieces, longer stuff, short form documentary and things like that, that would, they do DVD burns, runs and distribute them to libraries or things like that, or news packages that we could release to news organizations, because we didn't really have a venue for creative production, to put our stuff. So all this is happening while YouTube is coming on strong. And it became clear that that's where we had to start putting stuff and making stuff to compete in that marketplace. The timing was just really good for me in that respect. And I got more opportunities to produce some things, and ended up getting hired finally as JPL staff in 2012.
Now these things that you're producing, are they things that do you ever pitch things to them to produce, or is it very much, here's another project, we got to do this and do this and do this, we got to get this, the training, we got to get it to the media, we got to get this done? Is it more a matter of those? Every time there's a project, there's like a domino list of things that start falling your direction?
Yeah, these days it's a little bit more both. Back then, so the JPL media office, let's say, sort of started way back in the 70s or whenever, actually earlier than that, but in terms of what we see today, very much in the paradigm of like a newsroom, at that point it was very print focused, pre-internet and all that stuff. So they'd be putting out press releases and news releases and writing articles and stuff for release to get the information out. And so it was very much like a newspaper newsroom. And then that evolved a little bit more into more like a television newsroom, where you'd have a group of editors and you get an assignment. It was the approach was much more like, there's something happening, go cover it, shoot it, get like you would for a news event, come back and we'll figure out how to package the story and release it that way, which is a very different paradigm than a lot of what we do today, which is where it's more front-end concepting. We know we have to tell this story. Let's think of some creative ways we can tell the story. And it becomes much more documentary or just filmmaking, which is way more creative and more fun. And so I was part of developing that side of what we do now.
Well, that's fun, because now you get to use your creative juices on some of these things.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about this job that makes it, there's a million things about this job that make it amazingly awesome. And I am eternally grateful for having found my way into it, because Lord knows, I don't know how I did, but lots of things happened and I ended up there. And it's an excellent fit, because I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not an engineer. I hated math. I don't know, that's not natural. I'm interested in the subjects, but not, it's not my aptitude. But somehow, with a theater, musician, film school, whatever dude, I use every single bit of that every single day in my job. And what I studied in Seattle. In Seattle, I studied communication studies, which is sort of like the psychology of communication. So learning like interpersonal communication, small group communication, corporate communication, all that kind of stuff. Very, very valuable in the job.
Now, you said did you just say you use your theater and musical skills at your job nowadays?
Absolutely, all the time.
How? Explain how theater and music, how that knowledge can be applied to what you're doing running a media lab.
Well, our subject matter for most of our products are non-actors, right? They're scientists and engineers that we need to interview, that we need to build a story around and help communicate their story to the public. So knowing how to direct people, knowing how to pull a performance out of people, even in an interview, also, for me, everything is music. Like that's really where it all begins for me. Like I see everything. That was a huge breakthrough for me in my evolution work-wise as well. Is that, like I said in the beginning, I thought I was going to be a musician. I was going to compose. I saw myself as a composer. That's what I thought I'd do. And it was when I started doing sound design for short films and VO recording and non-musical audio production that it suddenly started to dawn on me, like that's composition too. Building, like I'm doing sound design this weekend for some animated stuff for work, and it's composition. Figuring out the sounds and where they go and the rhythm of it, and then editing video, when you have to do a 3-minute web package around a subject, and you've done 3 45-minute interviews with different subject matter experts, and you have a ton of B-roll and stuff to work with, whatever, you have to then compose that into like a 3-minute piece. And I just realized at a certain point, it's all composition. So when I was able to kind of like take what I thought was just the music focused kind of approach to composition and start applying it to these other mediums, it just started working. And
this
that's
is
when I
fascinating.
started really having success.
I want to go down this road a minute before we'll get back to the JPL stuff in a minute, but this kind of different approach to composing, using a musical approach and calling it composition, which in a sense it is. Do you start with like how do you take 2 hours of interview and B-roll footage and make 3 minutes out of it? Do you start saying, here's an important point, I have to make sure this is in halfway through or at the end, or do you know the beginning? Do you know the end?
Yeah, and at work there's a lot more voices involved as well, because I work primarily for the media office, whose responsibility is to deliver the news of what we're doing, mission updates, what we've discovered, what we know, where we're going, what we're doing. There are other things getting published and stuff sort of in conjunction with the video product. So there's a coordination of sort of how the messaging will happen, and especially now with social media being sort of the lead on all that. So there have been discussions prior, sort of what the message points are, the things we have to hit to make sure. But then also, if I'm sitting down and interviewing folks, if I can interview them for 45 minutes, I'm going to get all kinds of interesting stuff. And you never know what little anecdote that hadn't been discussed in a meeting might tell the story better than anything we had imagined. You just got to be ready for that.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I mean, I do it here. With these interviews, I never know how long they're going to go. So I just went down this little road with you on this subject. Back up for a minute also, how you're talking about there were some subjects that just did not interest you, and you didn't even go to JPL. You never visited the place before you started working there. What kind of, like, how much of an expert on space exploration have you become at this point? Like if you were on Jeopardy and that were a topic, would you like run the table on that topic, or?
It maybe in some categories, but I mean, I'm certainly surrounded by people who still are 1,000 leagues ahead of me. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the extraordinary value-added benefits of this job, and what's kept me so interested for so long is that it's like getting a free, education in this stuff, and it's amazing. So when I was telling you about when I started doing the AV work, just literally, they have these things called the DRDs, the Directors Review and Discussions, quarterly, which is like a 3-day event where all the top, the top brass at JPL, like 8 or 9 people, sit in a room, and one by one for 2 hours at a time, missions come in and do their full update, where we are in terms of progress, finances, status, labor, blah, 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 to complete reporting for the missions. And I would do these things where I'm literally sitting in the back of the room and just advancing PowerPoint slides as they call for them. But I'm in the room watching these things for days at a time, and I'm just absorbing all this information about all the missions and learning how the sausage is made and all that kind of stuff. And it was just invaluable institutional knowledge that I'm super grateful for. And that made a huge difference, both in understanding the breadth of what JPL does and the complexity. And I tell people all the time, like, yeah, landing on Mars is amazing, and orbiting, Saturn is extraordinary. But if you could see the level of organization among thousands of people across the world that go into each of those missions, you'd be even more impressed.
Can you, I mean, we can't go too deep in the weeds in it. I don't want you to violate any national secrets or anything, but can you explain in layman's terms just how detailed or how massive some of these projects are?
Well, take any spacecraft, like the Cassini mission that was at Saturn, right? So it was orbited Saturn for 14 years. Unbelievable imagery that we got back and discoveries and stuff. And it was sort of part of opening up an entirely new exploration path, which we call the Ocean Worlds program now. Which is because we keep discovering moons out in our own solar system that we believe have water oceans under their ice. They have like a frozen surface, but we think there's liquid water oceans beneath that ice that have been there for billions of years, could be warm enough and salty enough and nutrient rich enough that perhaps life could be there. So that's now becoming sort of the number one focus for where we think we could search for and find life in our solar system. And Cassini was a huge part of that. But so a mission like Cassini has a bunch of different instruments on it, a bunch of different communication systems on it, radios, antennas, camera systems, spectrometers, other sensors, and things like that. Each one of those instruments has a team that had to develop that thing along the way on a schedule. And then you have integration teams that are part of sort of bringing all those pieces together. And then you have to get built and put on what we call the spacecraft bus, all stuck inside and on the outside and everything. And it all has to happen, like we're inventing things from nothing, right? So we do what's never been done before. So a lot of the time, they're starting from scratch. So they know they have to reach this point down the road at a certain point for a certain amount of money. And you've got all these disparate teams working on their own to work their subsystem and then bring it together in time to get on that thing to meet their own schedule. And then add on top of that, that NASA across all the centers is sort of like a conveyor belt, right, of missions that are in progress. And if one of them slips, everything behind it can slip, right? So if one mission doesn't make their launch window for whatever reason, then they have to get postponed, which means the one that would have been there is now having to get postponed. So there's just enormous stakes, and this is all taxpayer money that we're spending. And so the stakes are even higher. So the organizational skill level and what you see in terms of making sure all that stuff gets done on time, on budget, and works is breathtaking, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing we don't think about. I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of work to do, but the nuts and bolts and seeing how everything has to be integrated and the timeline. I mean, if you're inventing things, how do you put a deadline on inventing something? This doesn't exist. You have to come up with it in a year and a half. I mean, that's kind of daunting. And now you scale that over however many things are going to be on that craft, and then multiply that by more crafts and by all these teams working on it. And then they all have to come at the same time. Yeah, that is enormous.
Yeah, and then the rocket has to get off the pad without blowing up, and you have to, and everything has to work. I mean, the Perseverance that just landed, just like Curiosity before it in 2012, that 7 minutes of terror everybody talks about, right? And why that's so terrifying for these mission team members, because they've spent a decade with this thing from inception through, reaching the atmosphere of Mars, sometimes more than a decade. And so basically it comes down to, the light time between here and Mars is about 11 minutes, meaning it takes 11 minutes for a radio signal to travel to Mars and 11 minutes to come back. So we're getting telemetry and data coming down from the spacecraft. And when it says, we've reached the Martian atmosphere, that message is 11 minutes old. Now it takes 7 minutes once it touches the Martian atmosphere before, if everything goes right, it's setting safely on the surface. So when we get the message back saying we've reached the atmosphere, it's already done.
But you don't know it yet because it takes 11 minutes.
Whatever happened is going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. So you're just so when we're watching the video, which we'll watch in a moment, every piece of the news that already happened 11 minutes ago. So you're just waiting to see.
All we can do is just chew our nails and wait and hope that all the signals we get back tell us what we want to hear.
And it by all accounts, it seemed to work. I mean, there might have been little things along the way that
worked unbelievably perfect. And so what I was going to say was that in that 7 minutes, from the moment it touches the atmosphere to the moment it's setting safely on the surface, I don't know if I have the number exact right, but it is something like 120 something single points of failure between little pyros that have to fire at exactly the right time to release something. And the parachute, of course, is the big one. That's got to deploy properly, and everything. There's 120 something single points of failure. If any one of those things hadn't worked, mission over.
Wow. Well, I have this queued up. I'd like to watch it with you if I may.
Yeah, so what you have here is, this was the recording of our full 2-hour commentary show that we did for the landing, which this is the show that I produced from the JPL location.
Now, ordinarily, if in a non-pandemic time, you'd be at a JPL, what, down the hall or in another building? Where would you be relative to this control center?
So I would have been in our control room, which is in a building, our TV studio building, which is kind of across a mall space from the mission control building, right? So I wouldn't have been in the building where all these guys, where you see all the folks jumping and clapping and stuff.
Okay.
I would
We're
be.
going to play about 4 minutes of this. I'd like you to walk us through what exactly we're watching.
Where the spacecraft will jettison the
Can you hear that?
entry balance
Yeah.
masses.
So what you're looking at now, if you want to, so this
deploy
image
and to
you're
roll
actually
over
see is
to give
a
the radar a better
software
look
tool
at the
called
ground.
Ranger, which was collecting real-time
The
telemetry data,
navigation has confirmed
and
that
that's
the
what you're seeing
parachute has
represented on the
deployed and
screen.
we're seeing significant deceleration.
And they're applauding there because what just happened?
Something that was supposed to happen happened.
Okay. Yeah, this is before. I think
oh,
this is before the shoot, before the parachute opens. So
yeah, that's
now
just the atmosphere. Oh no, there's the chute is open. Okay,
Right.
so that was the big one. Yeah.
Now this telemetry data. This is not a camera following the thing along. Obviously, this is computer generated based on what they know of where it is and what the angle is, and so
like
on.
a real-time, procedurally animated thing, and that list of stuff along the left side of the screen is showing you what the upcoming moments, are that they're waiting for.
Right now it says wait for TDS nav init. What would that be?
TD must stand for touchdown
Right.
something.
Now there's a technical
navigation,
director who's calling these
navigation.
shots.
I'm sorry?
There's a director who's calling these shots in real time.
Yeah, so very talented guy, Jess Doherty, is our TV director. So he's the guy who's sitting there with his TD and calling the shots and the switch of the show. I'm, during a production like this, mostly backstopping our hosts. So I'm giving cues to the hosts and I'm working the time, making sure we're on time in the show, and then we get to the segments properly, and that people are in places and things like that.
And this is this woman who's speaking.
Relative navigation and
yeah, the voice you hear is a woman named Swati Mohan, and she is, I forget the exact title is, but she's a landing operations lead person. That's her right there.
Okay.
And she's the one who is calling out for the whole team as these signals come in, as we get trajectory updates. She's updating both the team and the home audience.
And something else just happened.
We have timing of the landing engine.
Its radar system locked on the landing area and was beginning its process of choosing where it wanted to land.
So it can choose where it's going to land.
That was new for this mission. That was an upgrade.
Wow. So it can read the surface and find a level.
Yeah, it's called terrain relative navigation. It's a new technology on this mission where it could, that's why we were able to reduce the size of our landing ellipse so much from previous missions and get into a much, much harder. The big success of this mission so far is that we were able to successfully land in an area we never thought we possibly could, because it's so dangerous. But using this
we're about to land here.
Navigation thing.
So are you like, is everyone petrified at this moment because they're seconds away from landing?
There's a lot of clenching going on here in this space.
We have started our constant velocity accordion, which means we are conducting the sky crane, about to conduct the sky crane maneuver.
We've lost direct to Earth tones.
As expected. As expected.
Sky crane maneuver has started. About 20 meters off the surface.
We're getting signals from MRO.
UHF is good. Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
Wow, I mean, it's wild. I mean, just watching it all over again. I didn't want to talk. I mean, I knew what happened, but still, there's a tension to it.
Perseverance is continuing to transmit.
It's extremely palpable when you're there that day.
Now, when this happened, you were at home?
No.
You were?
For this production, we were there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of my life in the last year has been from home, from this seat. But we did, for our launch show last July, and a couple other things over the course of the year, production-wise, we had to go in and actually work because we need the broadcast infrastructure in order to make it happen. But, dealing with COVID restrictions and all the stuff, made all of this so much more complicated than it's ever been before for both the production folks, and of course these guys.
Yeah.
That's about a third of the normal number of people that would have been in that room. And as you can see, everyone's double masked with N95s underneath the outer masks. And there was a regular testing program going on. That building was basically sealed for anyone who wasn't on a special list. And like they wouldn't even let you go up or down stairs that day from one floor to the other. They were just very, very, very careful about risking team members and exposures. Yeah.
Wow.
And, I mean, like we had to reinvent how you make a program in order to get this done. Like our hosts were all in. We had 14 cameras for this production, and I think 12 of them were Robocams that we put in position so that we didn't have to have an operator in the room, both because we couldn't. We weren't there, room number restrictions, bodies in a room, and other things. But
wow, that's far out. I mean, just not just the technical aspects of doing it, but just the nature of what you're doing and the importance of it. So yeah, it's going to be nerve-wracking as hell. So, geez, good on you. So, I mean, how relieved were you when you found?
So relieved. I mean, I can tell you that in the weeks leading up to the program and the landing, 5 out of 6 meetings we were having were contingency meetings, right? Because we have to have a whole range of contingency options depending if it's what we call a bad day. And a bad day can be any number of different things. It was textbook perfect in terms of the landing and the timing and all that things, because one of the other things is just to get the data back from Mars, the rover itself has some direct to Earth capability, but also, Mars is a planet that's rotating and Earth is a planet that's rotating and moving in space together. So just to get a signal back, we rely on orbiters that are at Mars. Orbiters that were never really sent to Mars to be a communications relay for something on the ground. They had their own missions, but we've over the years developed this system being able to use them that way. And so the timing of the landing was such that we knew the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter would be flying over to do what's called a bent pipe communication, where basically the rover's signaling up to the orbiter, which is then signaling back to the Earth. But it was also it was a very narrow window, and it was possible that we could have missed that pass. And so we could have gotten enough data direct to Earth from the rover to know that it's on the ground, and that's all we knew. And then we would have had to say, we have to wait 2 hours until the next orbiter flyover, and we get an uplink relay to find out the condition of the rover or everything. All the way to, if that parachute hadn't opened, we know we would have been like, it's a bad day. We just made a crater on Mars. And
yeah, and then what would the contingency have been if something like that had happened?
If we knew that it was just like a devastatingly bad day, then we would have signed off the show at that point and said, come back for a press conference in about 2 hours. And then there would have been a press conference where they gave more update and detail on what they think happened. Of course, thank God that didn't have to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a nerve-wracking, another layer of nerves to get racked on top of everything else going on. So now this thing is there. How long is it going to be on Mars?
Until it's done. I mean, until it decides it doesn't want to do anything anymore. We have this kind of reputation, right, for outliving our warranties or our guarantees, especially with rovers. So the first rover, Sojourner, Pathfinder mission, more recently brought back into prominence from The Martian with Matt Damon, in I think 97, landed, and that was really just a technical demonstration. It's a tech demo. It didn't have a critical mission other than to show that we could land a device on Mars that could roam around, because we knew at that point from all the orbital data that we had and the Viking lander and stuff that we were convinced there was water on Mars in the past. What we couldn't tell for sure was when exactly and for how long, which obviously both make a difference in terms of the potential for ever having good life. And we knew that in order to figure out that, so Mars basically became about follow the water. That was sort of the impetus, the motivating factor for our exploration of Mars. And so once we knew that, we said, well, we got to get down and move around and explore. We got to be able to check out more than just, a 5-foot square area next to where we landed. And so they did this demonstration with Pathfinder to see if we could put a little rover down. It's about the size of a microwave oven, and roamed around. And it was supposed to last, I don't know, 30 days, and it went like 85 days. So that was number one. And then in 2004, we landed Spirit and Opportunity, Mars exploration rovers. And those were guaranteed for 90 days. And Opportunity lasted for 14 years.
Wow.
And that story, I mean, that's a fascinating story. It was based on, those rovers were solar powered primarily. They had, you've probably, if I showed you the picture, you'd recognize it immediately probably. Had the little masthead, which, gives it that anthropomorphic look. It's got a head and a neck. And then it was these sort of flat panel, wingy looking deck that was covered in solar panels. And that was its primary power source, which is why they thought it would only last 90 days because Mars has seasons, and we would be heading into Martian winter, and they thought there wouldn't be enough light on a regular basis to keep the thing powered. Plus, it's dusty and windy, and dust was collecting on the panels, and they were getting less efficient. And they figured those things would add up to maybe 90 days, and then it would freeze to death. But we quickly found out that on the surface of Mars, there are also dust devils and other little minor wind events that would just come sweeping across the rover and clean the panels off. And when they saw that was happening, they said, well, then, you know what? Let's see if we can figure out, like, if we think about it ahead of time, let's find a hill or a little berm or something that we can park at like just the right angle, so that if we just power everything down that we don't need during the winter, we'll get just enough light every day to keep the thing alive. And then come end of winter, we'll see if we can get going again. And it worked, and they did it for 14 years. The Spirit got stuck in the sand. One of its wheels got stuck, and it couldn't get out, and so it couldn't get to a safe parking space. But Opportunity went.
Amazing. God, isn't that cool how they just make these discoveries and kind of improvise their way around it like that?
Yeah.
And also the thing about dust devils, the universe provides. What can I tell you? Literally, literally elsewhere in the universe it provides. Now, what kind of imagery has Perseverance sent back so far?
Perseverance is amazing. Well, let's go first. Let's say, so Perseverance and Curiosity, the last two rovers, the big difference is that they're nuclear powered, right? They don't have solar panels. They don't rely on that. They have what are called RTGs, radio isotope thermal generators, to keep them going, to power them. And so they can survive much, much longer. They're expected to survive much longer. So Curiosity, which landed in 2012, still going strong. And Perseverance, same kind of power system. So we expect, as long as it doesn't get damaged or something else goes wrong, then it could last for 10, 12 years or more.
And what kind of imagery have they sent back so far?
Tons and tons. So there's 23 cameras on Perseverance across a range of needs. We have everything from what we call the HAZ cams, which are cameras pointed sort of behind the wheels, or sort of looking down at just the ground right around us. That helps us understand where we are and what the terrain looks like, and helping us how to know how to drive and where to drive. And then you've got a mast cam, you've got other cameras, a ton of cameras, and they're all sending back stuff at this point. We got, and like I said, we have a pipeline where essentially the imagery as it comes down from Mars is immediately pumped into this web page, and it's available for the world right away, unprocessed raw imagery. Our team does a ton of analysis and processing and stuff. And like when you see those panoramas or the 360 views or even the selfies of the rover and stuff, that requires, all those are taken as individual frames and stuff, and then somebody has to stitch them together and make those panoramas. So there's some delay in getting that stuff released. But there was 4,000 or 5,000 images down within 24 hours.
Wow.
Of the landing.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. And a lot of this can be seen at NASA's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/NASAJPL. Is that correct?
Yeah, youtube.com/NASAJPL or /NASA. That's the main NASA channel. And we're, prominent there right now as well, but always JPL. Or if you go to jpl.nasa.gov, That's our website, and you can find your way to all of our missions there. And then they all have their own pages, and you can dive down as deep as you want and see all kinds of amazing imagery and learn all the mission stories there.
And before we go, did I see on Facebook some months ago your team won an Emmy Award?
We've won 2 Emmy Awards.
Oh, shame on me for not doing my research. You won 2 Emmy Awards.
Yeah.
Far out. For what category?
2018 and 2019. We won Emmys in the category of best interactive programming, something. I don't remember.
You have won so many awards. Who can remember what the category?
I mean, it's ridiculous that yeah, never in a million years did any of us think that was going to be something that we'd come to JPL to do. But yeah, I mean, people like NASA. So
yeah, well, space stuff is cool. Oh, Emmy Award winner Stephen Epstein. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and telling us all about perseverance and all this stuff. This is really cool behind the scenes stuff, man. And look at you. You're just like, all in a day's work. It's like, whatever.
Well, no, I love sharing our stories because, like I said, I grew up here and never knew JPL was even a thing. So I'm always happy to tell people about what's going on.
And I presume we can't do it now, but once the pandemic's over, there are tours available. Is that correct?
Yes. Historically, there were tours twice a day, every day, and I don't know, 80, 100,000 people a year come through there, something like that. And I gave my own tours whenever I could. That all stopped, yes. In the last year, we have created a virtual tour site that I think is just launched or just launching for schools that can do. Actually, I know schools have been doing already. It's not quite the same as being there, but it's still pretty cool. But yes, everyone is very, very hopeful that once we get through this nonsense, that we'll be able to do real human live tours there.
That's everybody get vaccinated because I want to go on a tour of JPL. I've never been. Steve Epstein, thank you so much, man. This is really cool.
Good to see you, Joe.
Likewise.
All right. Take care, man.
And I'm saying, why am I waving this way? What the hell's wrong with me?
To your crew. Everybody, thanks, guys.
Crew. Thanks, crew.
Wasn't that cool? We all agree. Not to dismiss it, but I want to move on to something real quick. I'm in the closet. Literally in the closet. Not that expression. I'm in the same closet I've come to you before, and except this time I'm standing. These are some shoes you see sitting here. The carpet against the wall, this is as high as the carpet goes. It's kind of, the bottom is kind of touching the floor there. But I'm in the closet. I want to come to you from a different place from time to time. So this time I'm in the closet, but I'm not sitting on the floor this time. I'm standing. Can you tell I've run out of things to say?